If you've got a G80 or a G81 M3 and you want to improve its handling out on the roads, then this is the video for you. In this episode, we're going to be putting some upgrades on our G81 M3 Touring, not to make it into an all-out track machine, but to make it into a seriously capable road car. We're going to be showing you the upgrades that improve the car's road manners and the grip out on the roads, finding the ultimate sweet spot between comfort and performance. So this is our new G81 BMW shop car, and we got this because we do an awful lot of miles traveling to different tracks, supporting race weekends, and we needed a car that could do all of that, carry people, equipment, but also be an extremely capable fast road machine, and also maybe do the occasional track day, because at the end of the day, this is an ultimate all-rounder chassis. Our car here has the X-Drive system, which has the switchable rear-wheel drive mode. It's in tanzanite blue, which we really like the colour. Might not show up very well on camera, but in person, the colour, especially in the sun, really looks quite incredible. This also has quite a nice spec on it. So it has the carbon fibre M Performance bucket seats fitted, and it has the carbon ceramic brake kit as well. So with a car this big and heavy, the carbon ceramic brake kit is extremely impressive out on the roads. It has never ever once suffered from brake fade, even when it's been being pushed really quite hard. I mean, that said, the brakes over on our G87 M2, they're actually steels, and again, they are still extremely impressive for the mass of that car too. So it'd be interesting to do a side-by-side one day of the two cars and the two braking systems, just to see what we think of both in general, but on the whole, the ceramic brakes are truly incredible to drive out on the roads, and they've got good bite, good feel, and it just stops dead. It's one of the real standout features of the G81 out the factory, I'd say. That said, we have taken this for a good drive. We've got to know it very, very well out on the roads, and initial impressions are quite a few areas of improvement, and if you've got one, you've probably noticed these things as well. So the first is the front end, and this is what we hear from a lot of customers too, but the front end not only lacks feel, but it lacks grip. So when you're going into the corners, you can feel the understeer push, and it also just feels disconnected from the steering wheel, which isn't the nicest feeling, especially when you're pushing quite hard and you don't have the confidence in the nose. The other thing is it definitely lacks rake angle at the factory. I mean, if you've seen one of these out of the factory, the front arch gap is huge, and that also means that there's less rake angle, which means the nose is actually up instead of down. What this means is when you're on the throttle, it feels like the nose is a little bit in the air, and like the tyres are almost being lifted off the floor, which leads to that sort of high-speed understeer, and again, bleeds back into that serious lack of feel in the chassis. The final sort of point on the car when you're out on the roads, I'd say, is sort of rear instability as well. So when you're really hard on the gas, it definitely wanders around a little bit, and you can just feel through the corners that little bit of movement in the rear axle, which isn't helped by the sheer mass of the G80 or the G81 chassis. There's so much mass being transferred as you're going through those corners, it's going to be flexing all those rubber bushes, so you're going to feel that movement anyway. The plan for this car is not like our other builds. I mean, this isn't going to be a build as such. It's just going to be improved for fast road capabilities, and these upgrades will also perform really well on track if you want to take your car on track as well. But this car isn't really going to see a lot of track action, if any at all, because we have a lot of track cars that do that job for us anyway. So this is something a little bit different. We're going to be focusing on upgrades, really focused at getting this car working on the road. So that means we need upgrades that not only improve grip and improve the handling and the feedback and feel, but also aren't noticeable when they're fitted. You don't want to be driving this car on a daily basis knowing that parts are fitted in terms of like it feeling like a race car, you know, hugging the road, following all the cambers or the dips and making knocking and banging noises. We don't want any of that. We want to just do OEM plus upgrades that when they're fitted to the car, you don't notice they're there until you need to through the corner, where you really feel the grip and the feedback. So that's what we're aiming this video at today. The biggest issue we have when upgrading the G81 chassis is a lack of adjustability. This raises its head most in terms of the front axle camber, which is not adjustable at all as standard. And this leads to quite substantial understeer in the chassis when you're pushing hard out on the roads. The solution for this is going to be installing a front camber plate onto the top of the strut. This allows us to adjust the camber at the front axle and get the settings into a much nicer position so we can use the tyre more effectively through the corners, reducing understeer and increasing the actual feel and feedback through the steering wheel, both of which are extremely lacking as standard. We're going to be installing these camber plates in their central position, which is a really nice aggressive road setup. You could also install them in their minimum position, which would give you a nice road number if you just daily in the car and you do the odd sort of fast road driving. But we like to drive quite hard on the roads as well, so we're going to go for that central position. If you're moving more towards track usage, you could also go to the maximum camber position, which will give you much better settings for more track use to get all that tyre use through the corner. Our camber plates also have an offset caster machine position, so this effectively gives more caster into the front axle, which really targets that front end feel and feedback problem. I mean, caster itself gives something called mechanical trail increase, which is effectively a lever arm acting through the steering system. So the more you increase that, the more steering feel and weight gets put into the steering wheel, which this car needs a lot more than it has out of the factory. So not only did you get that increased feel and feedback, so you know where your wheels are being placed rather than just guessing all the time, you also get something called dynamic camber gain. So this is really nice to have on a BMW or a Porsche chassis, because what it means is as you're turning that steering wheel through the corner, the outside wheel as it turns is also gaining in negative camber. This gives you more contact patch to lean onto, increasing grip and reducing understeer, but in a straight line, you can run less negative camber, increasing your braking traction. So if it's your daily car and you're driving it in all weather conditions, in the snow, in the rain, it's quite advantageous to have less static camber, so you get better braking traction in those conditions, but the caster will give you even more camber through the corner, so you get the grip in the dry conditions too. So a really nice sweet spot to put a car in. So with these fitted, we're going to get a lot more front end out of the car, and also we use a solid bearing. So this is commonly associated with an increase in NVH and noise when you're driving on the roads, but like we said at the beginning, all the upgrades we're going to be fitting to this car need to be almost silent, so you don't notice they're there until you get the performance benefit from them, and that's exactly the case with these camber plates too. We use one of the largest bearings on the market in our camber plates, so once fitted, there is no increase in NVH or noise, so you don't actually know they're there. In fact, on a Porsche GT car, such as a Porsche GT3 RS or a GT4 RS, or like our GT4 actually, out the factory, those top mounts are actually a solid bearing just like ours are, and they don't knock or bang, and you wouldn't actually know that they were solid at all just from driving the car. So even cars coming out the factory do have solid rose joints in the top, so they don't always need to be associated with knocking and banging, because that's only the lower quality bearings that actually lead to that. So if you spec the right size bearing and the correct quality of bearing like we do in our camber plates and like Porsche do in their OEM camber plates, you don't need to have any excess noise or vibration coming from the car at all. Moving to the rear of the car, again, we have an issue with camber, but this time it is not the solution. So at the back, we want to increase that rear camber again so we can get more lateral grip through the corner and more tyre contact patch to lean onto, so we can match what we have at the front axle. Otherwise, we'll have quite an oversteer sensitive chassis because we're giving so much grip to the front due to the camber plates. But this time, the camber is actually adjustable at the rear axle. So at the back, we have an eccentric bolt that we can adjust the camber with at the hub, and this pushes and pulls the wheel in and out to increase or decrease our negative camber. The issue with this is the rear toe arm has a much smaller adjuster, and it means that when we get to the camber settings we want to run at the back, we can no longer get the toe angles that we're actually looking for. This is where our adjustable rear toe arm comes in. So with this arm fitted, it increases our range of adjustment so much that we no longer need to worry about compromising on camber and toe values. We can get the exact numbers we're looking for, so we can set the camber bolt where we need it to get the correct amount of camber at the rear axle, and then we can use our toe arm to increase or decrease the toe angle to exactly where we want to set it. They also have an added benefit. So like we mentioned before, this car is really quite heavy. So as it's going through the corners, it's wandering and moving around a little bit. So what that does is it puts a lot of force through the OEM rear toe arms, which have a rubber bush at one end. Now these effectively through the corner start to flex because there's an awful lot of mass being transmitted through them. And when these start to flex, they just let the rear shimmy around a little bit, and it leads to a bit of instability that you can feel out on the roads. Even with a PS4S tyre fitted, which doesn't have maximum grip, you still feel that sensation of instability. When you fit a rear toe arm with a solid bush at each end like ours do, you remove that flex entirely from the rear axle in terms of toe, so that means when we set that toe setting in the motorsport alignment later, we're actually going to be getting a much more stable chassis, because when we set that setting, it can't move at the toe arm. So it's locked in, and we get a much more stable and confidence building chassis because it feels the same every time we go through the corner. Whereas before, with the rubber bushes, it can feel different through a high-speed corner and a low-speed corner because it deflects more and less, which gives us different toe settings at different speeds, which really can start to feel unnerving and quite unsettling as well. So with the rear toe arm fitted, you get a lot more grip at the rear end due to being able to increase the rear camber, and you also get rid of that instability due to the bushes flexing around and moving at the back axle. In fact, on a CSL, M4 G82, they actually solid bush the rear tow arm straight away because they know that is one of the issues with the chassis. So by doing this, you're actually going more towards the CS and the CSL sort of handling characteristics. In fact, we actually sell the front camber plates and the rear tow arms as a package that we label the CS Plus handling package. And the reason we do this is because it actually gives you more camber at the front, like a CSL would have, and a solid rear tow arm with more adjustment range, like a CSL would have as well. So it's moving the actual chassis up towards the CSL handling characteristics just with those two components. They're actually the two components that give the biggest performance benefit, the biggest leap in performance upgrade that any other component can really do to this chassis. So a really great package to start the car off with. And then after that, we also have more components that we can add that still don't take away from the comfort of the chassis, but we can just start to refine those points even further. Now that we've addressed some of the bigger limitations of the chassis, we can start to zone in now on some finer tuning. So starting off at the front, one really nice upgrade for this chassis is a solid front control arm bush, and we do these in two versions. We have a concentric version like this one in my hand, and we also have a caster version which is still solid but adds more caster into the chassis as well. So there's two options to go at there, but one of the main things that I felt with this car when driving it quite hard on the roads is almost like an over-centering of the chassis, which seemed to like lock the steering up momentarily when you're on the brakes with a little bit of lock dialed in. So this is a scenario that you encounter quite a lot on the roads where you need to slow the car down whilst turning through a corner because on the road it's constantly changing direction. You're not entirely sure what's round the corner, where the corner's actually going to go if you don't know the road, whereas it's a lot different to track where on track you know the layout, you know what's in front of you, and you can do a lot more straight line braking with a bit of trail braking, back on the gas, and it's a lot more flowing, whereas on the roads it's a bit more choppy because you don't quite know what to expect. So there's more scenarios where you're quite hard on the brakes with a bit of lock dialed in. And quite a few times now I've really felt the car seem to rock forward onto the outside wheel and almost lock on the bush, and it feels like there's a bit of flex there and it just jams the steering, and all that means is as a driver you've got to sort of pull the steering wheel again just to get it to come back out of the corner, and it's a little bit unnerving when it does it, and you just want the car to flow and not have any of these holdbacks. You just want to turn in while using the brakes and then it just come back to centre all by itself, and that's what we want to be aiming for. So this bush generates that and is a really nice upgrade to get rid of that little issue. It also increases the straight line stability on the brakes because it just stops again that movement in the bush, and it just prevents that little bit of steering wheel wiggle on the heavy braking zones. If you opt for the caster bush instead of the solid bush, then that gives even more positivity in the front axle, and it gives even more dynamic camber gain like we talked about with the camber plates as well. So two really nice upgrades there. On our car, on this one, we're probably going to be fitting the concentric bush because it's only going to be used on the roads, and we just want to get rid of that lock-in under heavy braking. Whereas the G87 project will definitely be getting our caster bushes because that's going to be seeing some road and some track use, and that's where the caster bush really starts to thrive. So two little nice upgrades there on the front axle just to get some positivity back into the steering wheel under heavy braking. After that, the next upgrade we're going to be fitting is the front lowering spring kit. So on the G80 and the G81, just front lowering springs can be a nice option for you if it's mainly road driven, because the front arch gap on the G80 and the G81 is really quite excessive. So getting that nose to drop and getting that rake angle into the chassis is a really nice upgrade. On a G82 M3, which this video isn't technically about, but just worth mentioning, they're actually better dropped as a full kit because the front and the rear ride height on a G82 are quite high, like a G87 M2 as well. But on a G80 M3, the rear ride height at standard is actually really nice. So you don't necessarily need a full spring kit if it's a G80 or a G81. So we're just going to be opting for the front spring kit, which is going to get our nose down about 20 millimeters, and it's going to dial that rake angle into the chassis. And this again is going to give us a lot more front end and a lot more feedback and turning, and it's going to be much more stable under heavy braking. What it's really going to give us is it's going to get rid of that high speed understeer on corner exit, because without the springs and the rake angle not in the car, when you get on the gas, it lifts the nose up and it starts to go quite light. Whereas when you fit the springs and you get the rake angle, the chassis is already angled down and forward. So when you get on the throttle pedal, the rear is still going to go into squat very slightly, but it's not going to give you negative rake. It's not going to stick the nose up in the air. It's going to keep the nose down still. So the front tyres maintain that mass and that grip forwards, so you don't get really light steering when you're on the gas. So these are going to be a really great upgrade to fit to the car as well. Now when you're lowering your car with either a lowering spring kit or a Haas kit or even a coilover kit, as you can just keep going in the stages as you progress, you're going to probably want to install some drop links as well. So these have two main functions. If you're lowering your car, then they help to reset the position of the anti-roll bar. So when you lower your car, it sort of pushes the roll bar into a new position with the OEM drop links because you've dropped that chassis nearer to the ground. This puts the roll bar bushes under tension and it can lead to creaking, but it also means that they're preloaded in a single direction. So when they're unloaded in the other direction, they spring back too quickly and it can lead to quite a weird sensation and a lack of sprung front end. So when you fit the drop links, you can basically drop the car down to its new level and reset the anti-roll bar back to its OEM position so it functions back as it should. So it feels the same through left and right hand corners. If you're corner weighting your car with a Haas kit or a coilover kit, then they have a second added benefit, which is that you can then tune the lengths of the drop links to slightly different lengths all around the car to match the imbalance in ride heights that you've ended up with after the corner weighting session. And again, this takes the preload out of the actual bar itself. So not the bushes this time, now we're looking at the physical preload in the bar. Because if we have very slightly different ride heights, when the car is static, the bar is going to be tweaked and it's going to be in tension. What this means is we go through one corner, it's going to add to that tension, but if we go through the other direction, it's going to unload the bar and then load it again. And that's going to mean that it feels like it goes soft and then stiff, and that can lead to understeer on the front or oversteer on the rear. So when you fit adjustable drop links, you can actually tune that preload back out the bar and it gets rid of that altogether. So it feels the same in a left and a right-hand corner and gets rid of that instability. So some really nice little upgrades there just to finish off the package. So we end up with overall a really nice fast road car. So these are some of the best fast road upgrades you can make to your G80 or G81 M3. When these parts are fitted, there is absolute minimal noise in comparison to the standard car, which means you can enjoy all of those performance benefits without having the commonly associated downsides of an upgrade, such as noise, rattling, banging, and having an overly sensitive chassis. None of that is there when you fit these upgrades. So really nice upgrades to have for everyday road use, and they'll also improve the performance of that car if you want to take it out on track. If you want to get more track focused and more track serious, we have another series running on our G87 M2, which is being turned component by component into a complete full-out track car. So if you're interested in seeing how each component performs individually, check that out as we have a load of data on each component in those episodes, showing you how to turn your car into a full-on track machine. If you're interested in any of these parts in this video, then we offer free worldwide shipping on every single part on our website. In the next episode for this car, we're going to be back out on the roads, test driving this car with all of those upgrades fitted, so you can not only hear what the car sounds like from the cockpit, but also get some feedback on how that car drives out on the road.